Well, another episode at your disposal. Or, I don't know what the word is, which is appropriate. At your disposal, for your listening pleasure. I don't know. There are so many things, the options keep changing. The variety of introductions keep changing on this podcast. But I remain the same. And do I remain the same? Change. You know, I'm going to keep today's monologue a little low, a little shorter, because who are we? That's me, myself, and I. Have a great conversation coming up with Dr. Kumaramanickavel. He's a geneticist. He's a genetic counselor based in Madras, Chennai. I like it as Madras. And, this thing has been interesting for me for many years. Genetics, genome, of course, many of us got introduced to the idea of it, Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton, that whole thing of finding, DNA frozen or preserved in amber and the mosquito and all those things. But I think on a very layman's perspective, I found it interesting for many years. Just like, oh my God, we sort of have used all these things for years, like names and physical traits and cultural identity, and most importantly, physical things, right? Whether it's color, whether it's skin color, hair color, eye color, to differentiate and to demonize other people and to also kill other people and to claim supremacy over other people who don't look the same. And that's on a social sort of perspective. And it's still going on till date. Black Lives Matter, you have white supremacy, you have religious stuff, which is also based in many ways. I think there is a little bit of overlap when it comes to religion with color. But whether it's in India, the caste system, there is this idea that there are superior genetics or there are superior... let's not even go to genetics, but I'm going to pretend that I don't know anything about genetics. But there are superior people. But when you look at a basic, on the DNA level, is what I'm assuming, is that we all have the same genes. Now, there are, the same number of chromosomes, I suppose. Is that what? Maybe he'll explain. He's done a lot more work in this. So I'm going to let him get and do the heavy lifting in this particular conversation. But it baffles me that we are so, and this is for years, right? When you go 10,000, 20,000 years back, it just wipe out another species within the same species. People who look different from you, we don't like them. People who smell different, we don't like them. And we've done that for eons. That's exactly why I just built it up to this point. I wanted to use the word eons in today's episode. But, the genes themselves manifest in different ways in different people. But essentially, every human has all the genes that the other human has. Now, whether they express themselves, whether they switch on, switch off, all these things we talk about. But I just find it baffling that we can hate and kill and murder based on some perceived sense of difference. Yeah, we obviously are living in different parts of the same planet. Now, that's the important part. Same fucking planet, but we are living in different parts. So, I thought, let's get someone who's personally been involved in my life. Not personally, but someone I met last year. And, we've been having a conversation about my genes and about more specifically the eye condition that I have and the genes that have caused it, but someone who's also dedicated his life to introducing gene therapy in India, in educating people, also educating future counselors, gene counselors, getting the entire program up and running, spreading awareness, which is a huge thing in a country of our size, with the lack of information, lack of money, and it's not very tempting for people to go down genetic counseling because it's not a very lucrative path like, a surgeon would be, or a cardiac surgeon, or any of those people. So this gentleman's choice is quite noble. The work he's doing, he's training future genetic counselors to help people, because otherwise, the fears which come with ignorance is that, and especially in a country like ours where there is huge barriers to education and illiteracy being a large percentage of population being affected by illiteracy, there is, how do you approach this genetics and genes and, when people are marrying within the family and all these various sort of things. It's crazy. We have our own little hillbillies going on here. We have our own royal family in India where It's a much larger royal family, just entire states of royal families. Why should I not do it? The Queen has done it. So if that's the thing, how do you approach this? How do you sort of kind of get a feel for the landscape of genetics? And also, how do you proceed with this kind of issue, with this kind of research, with this kind of these kind of things, with the considerations you have to take into place, right? Because there's so many elements which are just specific to our country, and then you have the basic thing of, do we understand, do we know enough? And it's quite cool. It's quite complex, it's quite fun, and I genuinely had a great time talking to Dr. Kumaramanickavel, and I'm 100% sure that you will enjoy listening to his points of view on things which aren't his expertise, because he's very careful on what he's an expert in. And I like how doctors do that. And especially in this space, you have to be careful, because so he's well versed, a lot of knowledge in his field, of course. So we talk about his specific field, talk about his opinions and things. And this is not an intro. This is just, I'm trying to build you up, because it's a good man with a lot of stuff to share. And and also I haven't gone down my rant today, because I don't really have anything to rant about, because I will, but hey, it's the end of the year. I think we've got to be a little happy. The year's gone by tremendously fast, though. I think we say that every year. It's gone faster than last year. Why did it go down so fast? But Omicron is around, and I hope you are okay. It's just like a cold now, Omicron. It sounds like a transformer that has come and moved into your home. Omicron. What does Omicron do? Omicron bipedal. Translateral. But the world, of course, is still as mad as ever. I think Vladimir Putin is threatening with everybody. I will go to Ukraine and I will take all the cranes from Ukraine. That way it'll only be you. No heavy lifting will be done in the country of you, because I, Vladimir Putin, have taken all the cranes. That was my evil plan for the Battle of Crimea. I have taken all the cranes from Ukraine. Who would have thought that that was my foreign policy? Hey, Joe Biden, you thought that was funny? Huh? I took the crane from Ukraine. Now it's you. That was his intention all along. But other stuff, I don't know what's going on, actually. There's a lot of stuff, like the typical Monday morning refreshing news: genocide here, pandemic fallouts there, economic crises here, house arrest for democratic leaders somewhere else. Then you have military coups here. Then you have people, what's that called? Beheadings. Oh, that's another lovely thing, which just goes with the croissant right after your coffee. Beheadings. Repression of people who don't look like you are happening everywhere in the world. So it's a fresh pot of coffee brewing, as always, on this place we call home, this planet we live in, on, within, wherever. But for someone who's doing great work, besides the madness that's out there, I think this is important to understand. There are people like Dr. Kumaramanickavel on an individual front, setting up organizations, doing great work, not with all the loudness and the yelling, the noise. He's just doing stuff, helping people. So I salute him even before I bring him on the podcast. I hope you will enjoy it, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and do pass it on, do share it with friends, with family, and especially people who have concerns in this, who might be looking to start a family, who might have issues with themselves or someone they know. Great resource with the work he's doing. I will list everything, as you might have already found out, in the description, links to his organization, and you can find out more by listening to this conversation with Dr. Kumaramanickavel. Right? I'll see you on the other side. Till then, goodbye. God bless. Take care of yourselves. Aha. Cheers. Dr. Kumaramanickavel, welcome to the SoapyRao show. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining me today.
Thank you, Sandeep, and I thank the SoapyRao show for inviting me today. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you.
It's been fantastic. It's been less than a year since we first connected through a couple of common friends / doctors. And of course, right now you're sitting out of Madras, Chennai, and you are helping a lot of people through the work you do. We'll get to that, which is some very exciting work, important work. But I want to ask you just off the bat, it's been, I don't want to go too much into the pandemic and the lockdown, but as someone who's in this space of new science, new development, with the genetics, especially with genetics with gene disorders to do with the eye, and it's a new field in India, especially. You can talk about that at some point later in the episode. But how the past few months, 20 odd months, affected the progress of this kind of science and research, and has it brought things to a abrupt halt, or have things slowed down, or has it been a time for people to actually say, you know what, I don't have other commitments, so I can focus more on research?
Well, there are many things, many facets of this issue, particularly the pandemic and the genetics, particularly interacting with subjects who have a child or they themselves are affected with a genetic disorder. And another aspect is about research. Okay, all put together. The pandemic has affected as well as helped in particularly interacting with families who have some kind of genetic disorder. For example, now we can connect online. Okay, so my reach has now gone beyond all borders. Okay. So we see patients from Africa, different parts of India, and so on and so forth. So it's sort of a blessing in disguise, one way, if you see. The reason I'm pointing this out is almost about, if you take some of the very early affecting genetic disorders, not much treatment is available. So therefore, subjects coming from a long distance, then coming to know that there isn't any treatment, makes them a bit disappointed. So therefore, connecting online and then telling them about all that is going on and how they can do certain investigations. You don't need to come here to see the geneticists. So we are actually second line of defense. So subjects are seen primarily by a physician. It can be a pediatrician or a gynecologist or ophthalmologist, oncologist and so on. And then they refer them over for counseling. So we don't need to physically exam or have to be physically present close to the subject. Okay, that's one aspect of it. So it has affected in some way. For example, I have seen subjects in this period, so they don't have money. Okay, so even if you want to do a genetic test, middle class people also didn't have money because they lost a job. They didn't know what was going to go on. So that's the bad aspect of it, or the negative side of it. Coming to the research part, yes, certainly it has affected. Many laboratories across the world has been closed down. People have put on furlough. They've lost their jobs, and some of the clinicians who were doing genetic research were asked to do a COVID job.
I was going to ask, does the resource
so
get diverted?
It has certainly decelerated research in genetics, particularly on the treatment aspect, which we will talk in detail later. So therefore, it's a mix and match, Sandeep. You can't say for sure that it has certainly damaged everything or it has, helped. This is across the board in medicine, not necessarily focused on genetics. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, because this leads me to my experience when I was initially diagnosed many, many years back. But, what tends to happen is, as a patient, when you go, you want to get all the tests done and you want to get sort of the final analysis or meet the doctor with all the reports done. And when I used to travel to Sankara Nethralaya in Madras back in the day, it was like, okay, you're here for 2 days, get everything done in 8 hours. And it's quite a toll on the eyes, right? Getting dilated 5-6 times, getting those various scans, getting various dyes injected. And And yes, while you do need them, I think this particular setup where you can consult with the best doctors around the world, but you get your local test done at the comfort of your own pace, in the comfort of your own city, hometown. And say when you're doing it in Bangalore or in your place, you might know, okay, I'll go get 5 tests done. So in a week's time, I have the reports. So now I can consult with the doctor online. So it just takes the load, from one day. You can do it more comfortably and it's less stressful, I think.
Yes, yes. And, as you say, Sandeep, it's sort of, you can also look at it from couple of segments of social groups, like, lower income, middle income, and upper income groups. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So everybody, for that matter, undergoes this ordeal of running around here and there and getting investigations done. And then particularly people who belong to disadvantaged class, they suffer a lot because they have to be guided, they have to be orally directed, and so on. And somebody has to be very patient to do that, particularly in genetic disorders. Okay. So they suffer more than anybody else, I would say.
Even with something like COVID, no, doctor, explaining the concept of a virus, I think a lot of times the initial escape or the initial thing is fear, right? The fear of the unknown. Yes. And I think a lot of times, especially in a country as vast as India and with the population as well, which might be, I wouldn't say India is worse off, but we have a larger percentage of people who are more uninformed. And as a result can be manipulated, which is the sad part, by people who want to use this situation in their advantage, whether it's the vote banks or whether it's whoever it may be. But for you, like in this space, I mean, I think, explaining genetics we can do, but how do you initially calm them down? Because saying something like there's an unknown virus which is going to kill you is such a big thing to process for even a person who knows. Like I think, if I'm a layman, but at least I've done some basic science. So I know what a virus is, I know what a bacteria is. But still, in a world of today's extra information, there are so many people, throwing things at you, and you can, from the local news to the local newspaper to YouTube videos to these debates on national television. So how does someone like you as a medical expert, I wouldn't say just with COVID, but with any issue which is so overwhelming and so difficult for someone to process, what is your initial approach? Because number one, each case is different, each individual is different, but there must be some basic things you'd use to break that person's that fear, right?
Yes. See, one thing, I'm telling this for people who are juniors doing this kind of service anywhere in the world. See, if you don't know the language of the subject, that's the fault of the counselor.
Yeah.
Okay. Many people don't take it that way, right? And in counseling, communication is very important.
Yeah.
Okay. So the body language and the way you talk. And let me tell you, and this is known all over the world, is that if you listen to people, okay, they will calm down.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether they are emotional or they're charged up and so on. All that you need to do is to listen to them. Everybody has their own point to make, right? So you can't be judgmental in trying to know what exactly the other person wants to say and why they are agitated. Okay. So the moment you start to listen, everybody actually calms down. Okay. So that is a very, very important thing. And 90% of the times in genetics, the counselor's job is to listen. Okay. So the more you listen, you know exactly what their problem is. Okay. Of course, you can't judge somebody's, personal side of the problem, financial side of the problem, and the medical side of the problem by just sitting with them for 1 hour. Okay. So therefore, we have to know our limitations in the first place. But nevertheless, it doesn't matter what is their education, what is their social economic status. A good counselor should be able to cater to the level of somebody who's illiterate, okay, uneducated, to somebody who's a PhD. Okay. We have to modulate and we have to give examples and we have to tell the simile so that they are able to understand it from their own perspective. Okay.
Right.
And it's not difficult, Sandeep. Having done this job for the last 30 years in my career, it's not very difficult. You can always think and then find something that they can relate to and understand. Yeah.
Do you find the ones who are a little overeducated, the problematic ones, the ones who are like, I know, doctor, I know this, I and they come with all the Google data and they throw that at you and you're like, no, wait a second. Because, when Nivi and I, we spoke, and I don't claim to know much about genetics, but because of living with this condition for the past 30 years, by default, hearing what the doctors have told me, or by talking to other people, like, you just hear these terms, Stargardt's disease, you hear about cone dot dystrophy, you hear about these various, the deterioration, you hear about words like gene therapy, you hear about words like stem cell. So mine is just by experience that I sort of know a little bit, and I think it's good to know about your own condition, right? Otherwise, you might not, you don't surprise us down the line. But so let me just address it in its most basic form. We're sitting in 2021, end of 2021, and where do we stand right now as a country, or maybe at even the world, when it comes to genetic science? But maybe before that, for people who don't know, maybe just a few words, and maybe, I don't know if it's possible in a simple sort of breakdown, which if anyone can do to explain to them, I think you can do it best, is what is our understanding of the human genome as of today?
So what we know about human genome has to be understood in different applications that you can use it for. Let me give you an example. Okay. Now, what I can tell you now is that let us take something like an encyclopedia. Okay, the Encyclopedia Britannica with multiple volumes. Okay.
Right.
So a genome is equivalent to that. And each of the volume is equivalent to one chromosome, okay, which is some of the genetic material that we have in the cell.
Right.
Inside the nucleus, which governs everything from our, right from our conception till death, what should happen to us, what disease we should get, what color should be our skin, and what should be, what's the texture of our hair, the color of our iris, okay, and so on and so forth. It's all determined in it, okay.
That's held in the chromosome, basically.
That's right.
Okay.
And the chromosome is something like you have, in another way explaining as multiple buildings, like the volumes of encyclopedia, and each of them is built out of bricks, right?
Right.
So therefore, these are chromosomes are equivalent to that. But then coming back to encyclopedia, so what we know in human genome today very well is that we know that there are only 4 alphabets, okay, and in English language you have 26 alphabets, okay.
Yeah.
When I told this to someone, they said, no, there are 52 alphabets in English because you have capital A, small a. They don't have any relationship, actually. I still wonder why people say there are only 26 alphabets, right? Anyway, so the mother tongue of nature is very simple, only 4 letters. It's called A, G, C, and T. And you don't need to know more than that, only 4 letters. With that 4 letters, nature can make bacteria, it can make a leaf, it can make a plant, it can make a dog, it can make an elephant, it can make a human too.
Sorry, so what do those alphabets represent? Do they represent DNA? Do they represent...
it is part of a DNA, it's a building block of DNA. Adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine is the name of those.
So they're not just alphabets, they actually have names, the A, G,
they
C,
have
and T.
names, yes. A, G, C, T is the short form of them. Okay. So what we know in human genome as an encyclopedia is we know exactly how many A's are there, how many G's, C's, and T's are there. Okay. All put together, we have about 3.2 billion letters. And
As
this,
in these same letters in different patterns?
yes, in different combinations. Yes.
Combinations, that's the, okay. Wow,
so therefore, yeah, in this encyclopedia, currently we know that we have 3.2 billion letters as human beings. And we know how they are arranged and how they are put in each of those chromosomes or volumes. And that is something we know very well. And to a certain extent, very early onset genetic disorders, which we call as single gene disorders or Mendelian disorders, and some of them are mitochondrial disorders or chromosomal disorders, we know exactly what they are.
Right.
And we know that what is Down syndrome, and we know that there is an extra chromosome 21. So instead of 23 pairs, we have actually, which is 46 chromosomes as human beings, we have 47 in Down syndrome. Okay.
Oh, there's an extra. Okay. Okay.
Yes. And that is one type of disorder, chromosomal. There are only 4 different genetic type of disorders, actually. It's again as simple as the AGCT. So you have chromosomal disorders, and a classical example is Down syndrome, where a whole chromosome is in addition, okay, and makes it 47 chromosomes instead of normal 46. And then you have Mendelian or single gene disorders like retinitis pigmentosa, hemophilia, sickle cell disease, and so on, which is one or couple of DNA letters which are defective. And causes those kind of problems similar to chromosomes, they are early in onset, and so is mitochondrial disorders.
That's similar to what I have as well, right? A single gene disorder.
You have the single gene.
Right,
that's correct. Okay. Now, as far as these 3 components are concerned, chromosome, single gene, and mitochondrial, we know quite a lot of it in relation to our human genome.
Okay.
So we can do diagnosis, and some of them we can treat, okay, or manage, I would say, like sickle cell disease or hemophilia, retinoblastoma. There is a management option available, but majority of these kind of disorders, the treatment aspect is still going on in research.
Okay. Okay.
And there is a 4th component, which many people don't realize that it is genetic or familial. Which are called as complex disorders, which are basically age-related disorders or late onset disorders like diabetes, hypertension, cancers.
So diabetes and these things you just mentioned, the forms of cancer, diabetes, they are gene-related, is it?
Yes. So how you can put that is, unlike the early onset ones, which are 100% genetic, these are not 100% genetic.
Okay.
For example, if you take it like that, my father had lung cancer. He was a smoker.
Yeah.
Then he gives me the gene for lung cancer. Okay. Until otherwise I'm a smoker, I won't get lung disease.
Okay. Okay.
So therefore, the environmental trigger is very important. So how they try to relate it is that it's, the genetics is like a loaded gun. And the environment is the trigger.
Okay. So you could, but on the flip side, you can also be someone who doesn't carry that or doesn't have the predisposition to get lung cancer. So that's an empty gun.
That's right.
And even smoking then cannot cause the disease or cause lung cancer, right?
So if you're not smoking, you won't get lung cancer. And if you cut down the carb food and you're physically active, you won't get diabetes, late onset ones.
Right.
So therefore, environment is very important, and therefore we are in a genetic platform, and then the environment acts like a trigger, like for example, cancers or neuropsychiatric disorders, and so on and so forth. So, and this aspect of complex disorders in relation to our genome, we haven't understood it very clearly.
Okay, so why is it reacting to a certain environment? Why isn't it reacting in certain people to a certain set of other triggers? Okay, okay.
Yes, so why somebody gets glaucoma, why someone gets, as we discussed, lung cancer. We know to some extent some of the risk factors are there which acts as a trigger, but that aspect we have not understood it very clearly. Okay. There is another major dimension to all this, Sandeep, is that there is something called as the microbiome.
Right.
So we coexist with a huge number of bacteria in our entire body, particularly in the gut, the large intestine. Okay, and they are very important. They are very important in digesting our food and then making vitamins in our intestines.
Sort of like the factory in our body, right, which produces all these things, right?
Yeah, very correctly said. So it's more an industry.
Mm.
And the advantage is that, see, in genetics, you can't do much. You can't change it as of now. Okay. A lot of research is going on in that, in a technology called as genome editing, where they're trying to change the DNA letter that is defective. So therefore, these microbiome, you can actually modify them by changing your diet, by taking probiotics, okay, and therefore you can completely revamp or put a new set of bacteria. Okay.
Yeah.
In
So
fact,
you can replace or replenish your microbiome or make it healthier.
Yes. Okay. And there is currently a particular treatment called as fecal transplant. Okay. Where they take the good bacteria from people who are very healthy and so on and so forth. And that's how probacteria was developed. Similarly, they're trying to do equivalent, not exactly identical though, to kidney transplant or liver transplant and heart transplant. Fecal transplant is one methodology where even if you have a bad genome in complex disorders, modifying the microbiome can help you, in trying to avoid the disease or trying to reduce the what we call as morbidity, signs and symptoms. The pain and other issues associated can be reduced.
From what you're telling me, from my just kind of having these things you've told me, it's almost like each body has the same elements, right? Which is the heart, the lungs, the liver, the brain, and it has these the software, which could be the chromosomes, giving instructions that you will create these things, right? You will have this size heart, this size, this color of eyes, color of skin, but then you have this entire environment, which is the microbiome. So it's almost sounding like each human body has its own landscape with its own environment, and it's while we all are dealing with the same elements, the way this particular this environment of the microbiome can really govern despite what the messaging and the independent unique traits are, right? This thing is almost giving nourishment or taking away nourishment, which can be changed and which can be nurtured to be healthy. And it's almost like it's quite a thriving set of things going on at the same time, as opposed to saying the human body is one collective, or one big thing. It's actually multiple things interacting with each other, right? This is from my understanding as a lay person.
Yeah, microbiome is, it's something of big interest now, where people are trying to relate it to certain disorders and so on. Okay. So, not that we have understood it very clearly now. Microbiome is just there for the last 2 decades, and we have to know more about it and how we coexist and cooperate, how each cell in a body cooperates with microbes that are existing. And
so, Doctor, can I just interrupt for a second? I just want to ask, so does this microbiome, like genes, get passed on from parent to child, or does the microbiome create itself within each individual, irrespective of genes or lineage? Or so what I meant is it are you born with it, or do you develop it in your environment?
I'm not an expert to answer that, but I can make some guesses though. As we are born by normal delivery, we do pick a lot of bacteria in the delivery tract of the mother. The uterus and through the vaginal tract when we are delivered, we pick some bacteria there, as far as my knowledge goes. But then we are exposed to the bacterial environment, and in fact, our blood group is one classical example for that. The antibodies that are there any blood group ABO and so on. They don't appear until otherwise the child is born, and then it starts to get fed by the mother, okay, or any other.
So we don't have a blood group in the womb.
No, we do have, but then there are certain things called as antigen and antibodies. The antibodies are not there, antigens are there. So therefore, we pick bacteria subsequent to our birth, but I'm sure we do get exposed through the maternal circulation to them.
Right.
So therefore, we do get viral infections in the mother, like something called as German measles, and that can affect the lens as well as the heart of the fetus. And it can cause damage, it can cause cataract in the eye, and it can cause heart problems in the fetus. And now we have vaccines for it. And
in a prenatal stage, is it?
Yeah, antenatal vaccines are there, which can take care of them. Yeah.
No, what's amazing is we hear now of these, and I don't know if it's gene related, but I don't even want to go down this path of evolution versus creationism. I don't that thing, we leave it for another episode. But you hear of the prehistoric, or the not prehistoric, but like 10,000 years back now, that too, with a lot of people studying this field of genetics. You hear about how we migrated from certain patterns, right, from hunter-gatherer to more agrarian to more industrial to this thing where we are today. I don't know, which is a hybrid, I suppose, of living in societies which are overcrowded, which have lack of resources, with clean water, clean food, clean air. So I think, I don't know if the question may be appropriate or if it's well framed, but from that genome, which is obviously, in context of the larger scheme of time, it's much shorter. 10,000 years is nothing when it comes to the course of evolution. But do you think these kind of changes in, and you said it's a bit vague at this point to answer, but this kind of sudden transformation, when we see the technology revolution, we see the number of ways in which we're consuming food, the way in which our lifestyles have changed from flight or fight to more secure environment, safety, does that impact the gene, the genetics and its evolution, and also the other things that go towards it? Or is it more we'll feel this 5,000 years later?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, it's a very evolutionary philosophical question, because the entire nature, the law of nature is survival of the fittest. Okay.
Right.
So as you say, in today's world, that's not going on as far as the human beings are concerned, or domesticated animals are concerned. So the ones that are not supposedly fittest also survive now.
I think the unfittest survive the longest.
It's a rude way of telling it.
No, of course. I mean, and no jokes about any people, but it has become so comfortable that you don't have to fight or be even in a how do you put it, in a relatively fit form to face the next day.
Yes. See, for example, though that's not the topic of the day, is how the pandemic went around the globe, right?
Yeah.
And so many people got affected, and there was a huge media hype. There are more people who died with tuberculosis and cancer than with COVID. Okay, but then the entire media was so distorted. It looked as if people were just dropping dead because of COVID. Anyway, that's another issue.
Yeah.
But certainly, see, for example, why I brought that point of COVID is that you have to be healthy. Okay, you have to eat healthy food. You have to have a healthy lifestyle. You have to be very active, do exercise. And then all of a sudden, when a pandemic comes, you get worried. So you don't take care of yourself for the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And then at the last moment, if you think that virus is going to be, very benevolent, that's not going to happen.
Suddenly
And
popping supplements saying, I'm fine now. Yeah.
yes, and it was very clear in the initial days that obesity was one of the risk factors for morbidity and mortality in the COVID situation. So therefore, diabetes and people who have additional disorders were actually more susceptible. So you have to plan how to be healthy. Okay, that's a point I'm
Right.
trying to make. Yeah.
No, doctor, I think that's extremely, I think people have realized, I hope they've realized that, sitting at a desk job just to get that fat paycheck is not the end of living. It's not the
Yes.
point of living. It's also to, get a good balance. And I think access to food has become so much. I mean, of course, I can't generalize because there are people in, especially our country in India, who don't have access to food or clean water. But more and more now we see in the big cities, especially with a population getting more disposable income, that people are just eating for the sake of eating as opposed to eating for nutrition.
Mhm.
But what I want to ask you, I mean, as I said, I'm not here judging people's lifestyle, but when you have a larger population of people who are not fit, passing on their genes, passing on the various habits, and also social conditioning, which is also one of the things which happens when you're a parent to bring a child into this world. There are things which is not just genetic, but also environmental, right? Because we've come to a certain point here, sitting here today, with certain genes that have been activated, deactivated, which helped us survive, which didn't help us survive. As a result, we are what we are. But with the way it's going forward, do you see the genome itself changing with, I wouldn't say unfit people living, but with people who earlier wouldn't survive because of nature, given a chance because of advancement in medicine and science and technology, through various options of conceiving, whether they have different treatments, or whether they have surrogacy, whether they adopt, whatever it may be, giving the next generation, passing on whatever they are passing on. What will that manifest as? I don't know if it's a question or whether it's just something I want to know about. Since we've arrived here, what is the likelihood? The likelihood of these things happening with this environment, like with gene editing and all these things. What happens to the genome?
The genome is a very stable one.
Okay.
The DNA is extremely stable. It's survived for almost 3.5 billion years. Okay. Right from very early bacteria, anaerobic bacteria, till today. And human genome is very stable.
Okay.
But having said that, yes, there are a lot of evidences to show that how our current lifestyle, which is very much different from what it was when we were hunter-gatherers. Okay. And so we have lost a couple of wisdom tooth, okay, which we don't have now. Our jaw is much smaller and our brain has become bigger. Okay. The cerebral volume has increased from our prehistoric humans to current one. Okay. Even during that evolutionary phase, because of the hunting, we had to plan and we had to hunt and so on. Our brain became, particularly the cerebral cortex, became very complex.
Okay.
Much more complex in terms of ratio between the upper brain and the lower brain.
So cerebral cortex, is that responsible for like what we are thinking now, like innovation, intellectual thought? Okay.
Yes.
So that's advanced more than what it was. Okay.
Correct. So the cognitive ability of thinking, talking, judging, planning, strategizing, and so on. All that is purely something that is developed, of course, for a few million years. It's not that from very early humans to Homo sapiens. Okay. But now you see certain differences, like I told you about wisdom tooth and all that. But then to judge this in terms of time scale of 3.5 billion years, and you also mentioned that our lifespan, human existence is very, very short compared to what has happened in evolution. So, but nevertheless, we have, really caused more damage to the Earth than any other species. Okay.
Yeah.
Several thousand species have disappeared. no trace of their existence today as it was, just 50 years ago or 100
Yeah.
years ago.
Because of our way of
Yes,
life and what we've
yes.
created, right?
And if you remove humans, the Earth will be quite, much more safer than what it is with humans being in it.
I think
Okay.
we are causing, yeah, I think, well, I love it when human beings say, we are, what do you call that? We have to worry about the future of the planet. No, I think
Yeah.
we worry about our future. The planet will handle itself, I think.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so yes, certainly. But I don't know though, Sandeep, the answer for your question whether we can really cause any big change in our genome
Okay,
by various laboratory manipulative methods. Okay.
right.
Um,
No, it's interesting to just understand, but right, because we're in this place right now of this excess information, doctor, like where everyone has an opinion,
mhm,
everyone wants to talk about it. Everyone suddenly is in on the conversation, whether it's with mental health, whether it's with research. Like
mhm,
earlier it would be the medical experts or the research experts in a space who would talk about what they know, but
mhm.
which I think now everyone has access to information, which I think is a good thing. But
Yeah.
as a result, what happens is people end up becoming self-taught experts, which
Yes.
is not always the case, because information also can have a bias, right? That you
Mhm.
do read things that suit your agenda.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But
Yes.
with no, with this particular thing right now, with the way we are looking at with the things happening in today's day and age, with people wanting to change their body, people wanting to go into a certain kind of hybrid state.
Mhm.
I mean, where like I don't know, if ethics is the question I want to raise at this point, but the way we are playing around with
Mhm.
genetics and the genes,
Mhm.
do we know enough? Because we seem to a lot of times do things prematurely, and as a result create a lot of environmental damage. I don't know. I don't want to speculate about the coronavirus, but things like that, laboratory based things where we suddenly are like, whoops, we didn't realize that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Are we
Yes.
dabbling a bit too much at this point?
See, always there are different schools of thought,
Yeah.
and so I don't know, whether I'm right. But see, if you take, for example, I'm unable to read newspaper, then you give me spectacles. Okay, nature didn't want me to read.
Yeah.
Then be correct. And
Okay.
similar to various other disorders, right? So we have intervened into nature for a very long time.
I'm glad
So
about that, because I wouldn't be here otherwise, right?
yes.
I'm not nature's favorite at a gene
So
level. Yeah.
yeah. So therefore, trying to point a finger only at the genome modification, or not modification, sorry to use that term, but like for example in agriculture, okay, they manipulate the genome to get they are genetically modified organisms, right? GMOs. So it will improve the yield in a harvest. Okay, and in a world where people starve to death, okay, it's a solution. Okay. So again, this is a debatable issue, and I don't want to get into it, though it's a
Yeah.
bit of a genetics that we are talking about.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't want to get you down a path which is, which causes controversy, because even now with as you said, doctor, like with genetically modified, there's so many things that people are like, GMO products are horrible, so organic versus GMO. Then
Yeah.
with everything there's polarizing conversations. But the reason I brought it up is, I'll take the hit for asking controversial questions. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
But when it comes to people right now doing things like pumping their body with various chemicals, saying, I read this book saying that longevity, I have to go into a sub-zero pool, and every day the information changes, right? That this diet is going to make me live longer. This diet is going to prevent me from getting cancer. So someone right now just listening, and I don't want, I don't want to put you on the spot, but when you are an expert in genetics, right? And you hear all these things where everyone's just shouting and no one's listening, which is, I think, the biggest problem in today's day and age with social media. Is one day a person's like, I'm going to do I'm going to do a paleo diet with this kind of 6-hour, plyometric workout. And I'm talking more on a lifestyle thing, right? Because you did mention exercise is important, what you put into your body is important, what your lifestyle, whether it's sedentary, all those things make a difference. But now every second, third day, people change that up because one study showed this, one Google scholarly report showed this. So what would you say to someone who's so confused at the same time, who wants to be a part of it? Like, are there any basic tips saying, hey, take a step back, relax, kind of things, which just to get people out of that frenzy, that frantic way of thinking?
See, I have read and seen, many videos and documentaries on this. So the way an average man eats in an urban city in any part of the world is equivalent to what kings and queens used to eat just about 2 centuries ago.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. That's
so, most of the food that we have an access to was something that a common man never was able to reach. Okay.
Yeah.
So we are living in a very good environment. I mean, not for all the fortunates, I'm saying, there's so many people who are unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And since you raised about diet, there are 2 aspects of it. I read a Time magazine cover page article several years ago, which covered about various diets and exercise and so on. Okay. Atkins diet and this diet.
Yeah.
People have followed that for 40 years. And what has happened in the US was controversial because even though the gyms increased and the all types of food regimens came into existence, but obesity kept rising. Okay, I mean, they show so many reasons for that. But the point is that if you take a balanced diet in moderate quantity, that's the best thing. And that's what that Time magazine was recommending. All right. So many of these diets, which are very lopsided, okay, it might be protein focused or, carb lenient, or it could be, keto diet, like fat focused and so on. And we don't know how long this is going to, including vegan diets, okay. We have to watch for one generation to know this, whether they are good or bad. And secondly, if you have to have balance, right?
Yeah.
Being imbalanced always can cause problems. I mean, that's my view, personal view. I might be wrong in that.
You said being imbalanced.
Yes. So
out of balance, right?
You have to be in balance, whether it is diet or your life, the way you, as you said, people scream around but don't listen. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to be balanced, actually. So you have to be looking at both sides of the coin, right? Before you know that how to make your own view about it. Okay, nothing wrong to have your own view.
Yeah,
but you have to agree to disagree. So
I think also each body type is so different, right? As you mentioned in the beginning, each person has their own trigger, their own microbiome, their own genes that they come into this world with.
Right? Yes. Yesterday, I forgot that person's name. I was listening to a YouTube TED video. Okay. So this is a person who's in one of the top universities in the US and doing extremely good scientific research. And what he was trying to say is that we think that ice cream will increase our blood sugar.
Right.
But he has seen certain individuals that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Okay.
In some of them, rice increases their blood sugar. In many of them, but some of them, it wasn't sort of going very high.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are individual variations which are primarily genetic.
Yeah.
And therefore, what exactly you need has to be tailored to your makeup,
Yeah.
okay, physical or genetic. So that was the message he gave. So
Yeah.
it has to be personalized. The diet has to be personalized, okay, and therefore trying to give sort of a one fits all
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of regimen may work or may not work.
No,
Okay.
especially with workouts and with the nutrition and these supplements, I think it's quite kind of scary because it's earlier. If you have to say go into that level of mass building for your
Mm-hmm.
body, I think
Mm-hmm.
it is a very dedicated choice you would make and you would commit to that. But now anyone who is saying I want to put on 40 pounds or 30 kilos of mass can do it because they have access to those supplements, but not enough information,
Right, right.
and
So
not
that's
enough commitment, because earlier to take 10 years, but now
mhm.
you can get that same access in 6 months, and people want shortcuts around.
Yes, yes. That's a very sad side of it as well, that
Yeah.
they take a lot of steroid injections, anabolic
Yeah.
steroids to build up. I mean, this is a very common thing in sports and other medicine.
Mm.
But then you have to be careful. As you said, see, you have to focus on fitness,
Mm.
okay, which is very important. Clearly shown that if you're fit, then the chances of you getting the age-related disorders like diabetes or hypertension,
Mm.
Cancer, neuropsychiatric disorders are less. Okay,
Mm. Mm.
being fit is very important. Eating healthy food and then keeping your body weight to your height with normal BMI
Mm.
and your abdominal breadth, okay, waist to hip ratio, which is very, very important.
Mm.
You have to keep a tab on that, okay. But then going beyond that, building your body and so on is something that I have my own views. I have a lot of conflicts about it,
Mm.
but that's my personal view.
Yeah.
Okay, people go to a frenzy extent in these things, but
Yeah.
you can't help it, Sandeep. You can't stop them.
Yeah.
People
Now, as
get
long as they
obsessed.
know it's their decision for their body, right? I don't
Yes,
think
that's correct.
it's
And
something which they
some of
should
them
apply.
know it is, say, for example, you take anabolic steroids, that's
Mm.
going to affect your marriage and children.
Right. Right. So
So,
it reduces testosterone, fertility,
exactly.
all of those things, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
spermatogenesis and all that. So, therefore, if you know that and then willingly do it, it's up to you. Okay.
Yeah.
But then if
I
you
think it's a
don't
good thing
know,
if more
yes,
Indian men do that, so we have a less
yes,
population.
yes. So the repercussions, see, you can't just look at short-term goals alone. It
Yeah,
will have an
yeah,
impact on long term. Okay. So
yeah.
therefore, you should be balanced and then do
No, no, I
things.
hear that, doctor, like people are like, oh, no, no, I run. I said, okay, good, you run. But they're like, you should run 100 kilometers. I'm like, okay, but why would you do that? And they're like, no, when we were hunter-gatherers, we were
Yeah.
designed to run 100 kilometers. I'm like,
Yes.
but the environment was different, right? You were running
Yeah.
for survival to get food, or you
Yeah.
would chase your prey like an injured moose or whatever, right? But now, like running within, say, Madras, Bangalore on the streets, 100 kilometers.
Yeah.
I,
Cycling. I
yeah,
cycling too. Yeah.
and also now, yeah, cycling is another thing. And also the thing is, then people didn't live till 80, 90. They lived till 40, and they could have
Yes.
been eaten by a
Yes.
tiger the next day.
30 was the prehistoric man's lifetime.
Yeah,
So
I
see,
mean,
that 2 points I'd like to make here
yeah,
is that one, we have increased our lifespan,
yeah.
but we have decreased our health span.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you just tell people what you mean by that statement?
Okay. So, for example, prehistoric men. I mean, I'm sorry to use the word men. Okay, it also includes both genders.
Right.
Prehistoric humans lived for 30 years.
That's it.
And
this is the
yes,
10,000 years
40
back.
or something was our average lifespan in India, and today it's 69 or 67 in India.
It was 40, even 10,000 years back? Like this is during...
No. I'm talking about Indian independence.
Okay, 70 years back.
Close to 40 something, and then now we are living up to 69. Okay.
Wow, that's quite a lot actually. Right.
Yeah, this is average lifespan.
Right.
So, say for example, when you say that lifespan and you live for say something like 70 years of age, that's not important today. What is your health span is important. So you are healthy up till say 60 years of age, with lifespan of 70 years, which means you have disease for the last 10 years. That's fine.
Right.
You really lived a very good, healthy life. Okay. But then you pick diabetes at 40 years of age. That means you're going to live with it for 70 years, which means you have reduced your health span.
30
So that
years
is
of
very
that.
sad. So people don't take care of that, which is very, very sad. So on the other side of it is that you earn through your life, and last few years of your life, you spend all that money.
You know, it's such an interesting thing that you mentioned that, because that's what people do, right? It's a headlong rush to save, to build that dream home, and you just work 90-hour weeks saying, when I retire, I will sleep, or retire, I'll enjoy my money. But by the time they retire, their health is so bad that they've spent all the money they've saved on healthcare. Right?
Yes. One kidney transplant is enough. I mean, 25 lakhs goes off. Okay.
My God.
It has to come from some of your saving or the property that you've made. So, and diabetes, unfortunately, is something we can prevent.
Right.
Okay? And you ask for it, and then you take it, and you suffer from it. You have to be careful.
I think it's a curse of abundance, right? That we live in this world now.
Yes and no, actually, Sandeep, because we have done a study in Mumbai, in urban slums of Dharavi, on diabetes and diabetic retinopathy, and we found that there are quite a lot of people there. So it doesn't matter whether it's abundance or not. So if you live in an urban society, then cheap food is at cheap cost.
Right. And that's what I meant. I mean, curse of abundance is a person with 10 rupees can still end up, earlier, like, we would, I was just talking to my wife about this, that, we would order in maybe once in 10 days or eat out once in 20, 30 days or whatever, maybe less, maybe more. It depends. I'm not making general statements. But now you can, depending on your budget, you can get, quantity-wise, you can get so much more.
Yes.
Like, that's what I meant by that. It's like a person who has 50 rupees can still end up going and snacking at a fast food joint. Yes. And a person with 500 rupees can do the same in a more expensive place. But it's just so much more quantity of food going into people that I think
unhealthy.
Yeah.
That's very well known in the US as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So they've seen it that in lower strata, people do eat junk food and end up with various disorders. Okay, so I misunderstood your abundance as affluence, actually, Sandeep. Sorry.
No. I mean, I just sort of, this is what I've heard. Like as you mentioned just now, right? Like if the people who are being targeted by these big companies, the frozen foods, the processed foods, the microwave meals, they're so cheap. Like when I did college in America, you could get these, like the equivalent of top ramen noodles, like Maggi noodles, 24 packs for $2. Yes. But you want to buy fresh vegetables, it's about $5. And as a student, I'm like, it's a no-brainer, right? I'm going to save money. Or if you get frozen chicken breasts, 8 of those are $2, but fresh chicken is $5 to $8. So it's almost like they're tempting you by saying, no, don't eat healthy, eat.
That's very correct. And also, they make it like that because it's all purely economics, right?
Yeah.
So it is more expensive to make vegetables than to make these things. And scaling is another issue where there's a limitation of scaling in vegetables, but you can do that in other processed products.
Factories. Yeah.
So,
and it's good to keep people unhealthy. That way they're profitable, right?
Since you have said that, there is another big dimension to that, Sandeep. For example, the reason for obesity is not only that abundance. Okay, the reason for obesity, there is another dimension, as I said, is that stress. Okay, so when you're stressed, you have two hormones that goes up. One is adrenaline, and the other is actually your corticosteroids. The corticosteroids will increase your appetite. Okay.
Is that the same as cortisol?
Yes, cortisol is the injection. Yes, corticosteroid is what we generate in the body.
Okay.
And when you want to suppress that stress factor, you need only 3 types of diet. Okay, one is high carb, high fat, high salt. And this is what all these major companies, which
Oh, so
produce
you're saying
fast food.
that steroid gets these pangs of
Yes,
cravings for these things, and the ones which satisfy it are the ones which are not good for you, which
yes,
basically are chips and
yeah,
pastas and cakes and breads.
exactly. Yes, these are
Oh,
the three: high carb, high fat, and high salt. Okay, all fast
okay.
food companies' food is
So,
made out
so
of these.
doctor, sorry, was the because of the environment which causes stress, which causes the release of this,
Yes, yes,
right? So it's almost it's not that it was the case. We had it somewhere in us, but it was triggered more recently by these
yes,
lifestyle dis. Okay, okay,
exactly. So therefore, if you want to de-stress yourself, you go to a junk joint and then have these
hmm.
food, and then your steroids will come down. You get satisfied, and then you come out of it. So it's sort of an
Wow,
addiction, actually. Yes, very sad
wow.
what's going on. Yes.
And that's
So
how people demonize certain things, which actually, like, with cannabis or something that is so bad for you, but they do it over a packet of chips and coffee with 3 spoons of sugar, which is, they don't realize as bad.
yes, yes. But sometimes there are a lot of hype also, and sometimes there's certain branding that happens. Okay.
Mm, mm,
For example, eggs were branded to be very unhealthy
mm.
somewhere in 70s and 80s in the US.
Okay,
Got bad publicity,
right.
but that's not the case. It's one of the most healthiest food that you can have. Very
Yeah.
good for your eyes, prevents age-related macular degeneration, and it has so much of nutrients. I mean, it's supposed to be giving life to one chick, right? An egg.
Yeah.
So it must be certainly having
Yeah.
everything
Some
built inside.
nutrition.
Yes, it's, yeah.
But at the same time, if you eat 30 egg whites, like, I have to build up your muscle mass. I don't
Yes,
think.
yes, certainly, certainly.
But
But do
okay,
they
so doc,
eat the white actually?
yeah, the
Everyone's
whites. Yeah, yeah.
yes. That's again the misconception actually. Yeah.
Now, I
Yes.
just mean, before we go into the specifics of your work and how you are helping people through your organization, I just want to have one question, because now you hear a lot of people using this very loosely, right? Or maybe not loosely, but they use it in conversation about how you can switch on and switch off your genes.
Yes.
So maybe could you just, I don't want to go into too much detail because I know it's a scientific explanation which will be needed, but first of all, what do they mean by that? Second of all, is it possible? And could you just sort of take us through that?
See, basically, say for example, if you are going to have highly sugary food, okay, your
Mm-hmm.
insulin is secreted. Okay. So therefore, the insulin gene is switched on, and then it results in secretion of insulin. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So they did a large animal study with mice in the US. It was published in Nature or Science about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was they had two sets of rats. They're genetically identical. And what they did was that they were doing an experiment to find what are the genes that are getting switched on and switched off. Okay.
Okay.
Which means the genes start to express or they don't express.
Right.
Okay, that's what it means when you say it's on and off. So one set of animals, they fed them with high carb food.
Mm.
Okay. Another set of animals, they fed with low carb food. And in the high carb food set of animals, the age-related genes started to express. Okay.
Ah, okay.
So the health related to genes were expressing in the low carb food set of animals.
Okay. So the health related genes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And then what they did is, halfway through the experiment, they stopped the dietary regimen of these two groups and they switched the dietary regimen, which means the low carb were given high carb and the high carb was given low carb.
Yeah.
So exactly the reverse happened.
Oh, so the group which had formerly the low high carb.
Age-related genes started to express healthy genes, and in the healthy genes group, the vice versa happened.
So this is that important word which you said, the environmental triggers, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
So all age-related diseases, environment plays the critical part, not your genetics.
That's,
Okay.
I think, really important to know. Like, some people are like, "Oh, I'm just born with bad genes," and they sort of, they have a fatalistic approach, going, "What can I do anyway? This is what I'm born with." No, and that's so good for them to hear that it's so much is in your hands.
Yeah. So when you talk with your uncles, aunts, and so on and so forth, and if they say that your uncle died with heart disease, or your uncle died because of hypertension, he was obese and diabetic, that's an indication for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a family history, so you be careful about your diet and activity. I see. It's not that you have to live forever. Nobody can live
Yeah.
forever. Okay,
You have to
but
live well, I think, right? Yeah, I think that's
yes, the health span. Okay, the health
yeah.
span is what is very critical.
Yeah.
And your ill health results in draining your savings.
You know,
Okay.
that's such an important thing for people to know. I think this is something that, I'm not a health nut, but at the same time, past few years realized the importance of how I feel when I'm physically active, right? And because because of my lack of vision, I'm not able to go walk down the streets, or I'm limited in that movement. But I've noticed, and I do blood work every year to find out my things. But like with certain things, like for instance, lipid profile, the triglycerides, are high for me, and how much ever exercise, they're not dropping. So my doctor said it's because it is in your family. So now you can refuse to take medicines and work out extra, but it's not going to go down because you're predisposed to have this certain thing. But if you monitor it, it's not like anything's going to happen tomorrow or day after, but in the long term, by you're using statins or whatever the medication he gives me, you are able to live a better life. You can't undo your gene, but you can use that as information to live a better, healthier life, right?
Yes, and also you have to start early, Sandeep. That's very important. Okay.
Right.
If you know these things when you're sort of crossing your adolescent age and getting into an adulthood, and you know it, then you should start by then, which around 25 years of age, and that's a good starting point, I would say. Where you're fairly matured, you're knowledgeable, you can easily get that information. And I'm a little negative person in terms of drugs and so on. It doesn't prescribed or whatever.
Yeah.
So there are many ways. Our human body is a system, Sandeep. And if your triglycerides are high, then you find out what is the diet that will reduce it.
Yeah.
And it's all there in the net. You don't need to be... see, you have to be your own doctor first.
Yeah. So it can be controlled. Initially use it to
guess actually, I don't know though. I'm making a guess because you take a bit of a fatty food or whatever it is. There are certain genes in the body, particularly cholesterol. If you reduce your cholesterol diet, body will produce it.
Okay.
Body has the mechanism. Okay.
Right.
Certainly, your physical activity like jogging for whatever time in a day will reduce them. Okay. So there are certain receptors which are gene related, LDL and HDL receptors.
Okay,
in liver cells. HDL receptors. HDL per se is a good boy. Okay. LDL is a bad boy. Okay. So if you smoke, your LDL will go up. If you drink alcohol, your LDL will go up. And if you exercise, LDL will come down. And your HDL will go up. Okay, so therefore,
so it's a constant balance, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you have to be your own doctor in the first place. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you go and take consultation from physicians. I'm not saying that drugs are bad or surgeries and so on. You can prevent a lot of these age-related problems. Okay. You can push it towards your later life. Okay, not at 50 years when you're in the peak of your career.
Okay.
And that can affect you in a big way, all right? Career-wise, professionally, and financially, and so on. Okay. Yeah.
Doctor, so you are a genetic counselor now. You're based in Madras, and you've done some leading work in this space. And you're focused specifically with the eye in ophthalmology. So can you what took you from, in a country like India, and of course you worked with people, collaborated around with doctors, specialists around the world, but what led you down this path of genetics rather than being a conventional ophthalmologist, which is more established in India, which is sometimes more lucrative, to go down this path of, in a country like India, which is few years behind, I wouldn't say backward, but few years behind research in some of the other parts. And I don't know what the governing sort of guidelines are around genetics in India, but what led you down And what were the things that helped you or made you decide to go into genetics in India at a time like this, in our present day?
I don't know actually the answer for that, Sandeep, but I'm glad I did pick it up. Okay, so when let me tell you my education, because I have nothing to do with ophthalmology in terms of certification and so on, though I got into ophthalmic and vision research.
Okay.
I did my graduation in medicine MBBS from Madras Medical College, and then my MD in physiology.
Okay.
Why I did physiology is a big story, and we don't have time for that. So genetics interested me the moment I finished MBBS, because somebody told me that there's nobody in India who has done this.
Right.
But having seen it, genetics will never give you money. Like ophthalmology or orthopedics or cardiology and so on.
Yeah.
So, and the moment I knew that there's nobody, it interested me, I guess.
Right.
And I'm very glad I took it. And many of my MBBS classmates thought something went terribly wrong with me, that I have picked up a field that nobody, would dare to even get into it. In my times, it was advanced. Genetics was advanced. That's I'm telling you. Most of the listeners would not have been born that time. In 1982, I took that decision. 82, 83.
Oh, wow.
You must not have been born, I guess.
No, I was just born.
Okay. So, many of my classmates thought I was crazy, and I'm sure they would have thought I would fail and all that. And, I learned it in the by burning my fingers professionally, you see. But I'm glad I took it, and I got the opportunity to go to New Zealand and US, and wherever I was elsewhere in the world, I always wanted to come back to our country and train our own people, which is one of the most the happiest thing I do is to train my own students and medical graduates and so on, particularly ophthalmologists. And I would have grown maybe vertically if I was elsewhere in the world, not returning to the country. But then I have grown very laterally, horizontally. I made more people learn these tools and techniques. And currently I have 6 PhDs with me, and many students undergoing genetic counseling training, and they want to go abroad to get a master's and so on.
I think all the doctors or the genetic counselors I've met after, I've all been like, that we studied under Dr. Kumar. So I think you're pretty much the authority on it right now.
That tells my age, Sandeep.
No, I know, and doctor, I think I'm going to slip this in here. I think on behalf of people like me who are, future parents or people who are dealing with genetic disorders. 1990s when I got diagnosed by Dr. Badrinath in Chennai. I mean, he gave the final thing, because till then it was uncertain. So people like, for me, he's someone who gave hope, saying you're never going to lose your eyesight, but, to give some sense of reassurance. But a lot of times that doesn't happen from doctors. And I'm not saying all doctors, but sometimes just doctors don't want to take that risk of committing to a certain, certain advice or certain reassurance. But Dr. Badrinath's one example, and you are another example. Like, I think I can name 3-4 doctors in my life who've given me a sense of reassurance and hope, and I think you've done that to a lot of people. So I just wanted to, thank you before we go forward.
So let me take a little time about Dr. Badrinath, because I worked with him for 11 years. He's an amazing personality, phenomenal person.
Yes.
And he's built one of the best institutions in the world. And I'm glad I worked with him. And he's a saint, actually. A saint in the field of medicine and ophthalmology. A great man, and no way I can be compared with him. These Himalayas, I'm a small grain in a soft sand in a beach. Yes, the sad side of the story is that, as I told you, I've been in this field for 30 years now, 35, I would say. And 20 years ago, there should have been a treatment, Sandeep. And we all were expecting, once the human genome was sequenced, gene therapy will be something like going to a drugstore and getting a prescription drug. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sadly, that's not happened. There are many reasons for that. Okay. Very much biological challenges are there. Okay. It's not so easy to manipulate a gene. But
It's not intervention from big companies to prevent? Has there been any of
no,
that? No. Okay.
no, really, actually.
Okay.
In fact, that's a big transformation that happened somewhere in 80s and 90s in the Western world, particularly the US.
Mm.
The governments and universities didn't have the money to do genetic research, particularly gene therapy, okay, and
Right.
stem cell therapy. So today, it is the large pharma companies which are providing the maximum amount of money for genetic research.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
See,
Okay.
what is their ultimate intention is another part of the discussion. But then they are the real people who are giving the life support for genetic research.
Yeah.
The
I
role
recently
of
did a
government.
show for Novartis, and they said they are
Oh,
working with
yes,
eye-related
yes, they are.
cures.
Yes, they particularly the SPARC, the RPE65 gene therapy methodology.
Okay.
Is something that they have patented and they are now promoting it with a real bomb cost. Actually, it's so expensive, and people like us who have been in this field. In fact, I should make a mention here that it was two groups in the world which identified the RPE65 gene to be causative of a condition, congenital amaurosis and early onset retinitis pigmentosa.
So
So
that is that
one,
the one called LHC? That's the
LCA.
LCA. Okay, and that's the one which you mentioned that has a therapy, gene therapy out there now, right?
Yes, yes, and a very early onset retinitis pigmentosa, which is caused by the mutation in RP65 gene.
Okay.
So two groups found that out. One is in Boston, in Harvard, and another one was our group in New Zealand.
Okay. Okay.
So we too were the first groups to identify and see, it is a patient and the family who give the samples, Sandeep. I'm sad about these companies finally making money out of it. Okay. See, genetic disorders, particularly the early onset ones, the treatments are very expensive. And governments should put their head down and make it available. There are few that are available at free of cost. Sanofi does that. Okay.
Sorry, doctor?
Sanofi is a company, and they do one particular genetic disorder, and it's not striking my mind the name. I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Where you can do gene therapy and avail it at no cost. And there are groups which are trying to make it affordable and available to all groups of people. There is an organization called HOPE. Okay. It's based in the US, I think, and they are trying to see that investigations and all are available in case if they cannot afford it, they step in and try to help.
That's nice because,
yes,
even with low vision aids in India, I was talking to someone about how inconsiderate it is almost when, you want to get something. Yes, okay, I don't want to go down this path because it's another discussion for another day. But, there are companies, of course, locally trying to do it with creating low vision aids, whether it's with prosthetics which are affordable, whether it's guided access tools, navigation tools, etc. But many times it's not available. But if you want to bring it, not only does the government not give you a, say, like for instance, in the Netherlands, they'll say 80% is covered by your local,
right.
Whatever the word is, whether your local medical thing takes it over, or maybe whoever the thing is, and no one here does it in India, the government side. But second, I understand, big country, we can't do that. But besides that, what they don't do is they don't waive off an import duty on it. So like when I get glasses, which are low vision glasses, I have to pay 80% import duty on something which is already so expensive. So it's quite disheartening to see that,
Yes, that's a very, very sad part of the story. They see, it's not that with particularly, say, as you said, in low vision aid or many things of that sort. Okay. you can't make a big profit out of it as a government.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have to be leaving it to some experts to judge and give them a report. And some of these things can be excluded from
Absolutely.
duty. You know?
Yeah.
So, and also the, other governments across the world I'm talking about, they should put their head down and make these things in a country like, very, very cheap labor is available. These are not rocket science, okay?
Yeah.
That you cannot do it. And
I mean, they do it for every product.
Yes,
You know.
you take a mobile company to Vietnam. You take so many things so that your cost is cut down.
Correct.
Production costs. You have to do that for.
And I think they don't realize is that if you can make the same thing, say in a China or in India, wherever the product cost comes down, and if you are able to make this on scale, and you give the 30-40 million visually impaired people access to these tools, you're in fact reducing cost of your governance, right? You're reducing their dependence on the system. If you have a country where they're paying out a certain amount, whatever, you're making them independent, dignified members of society who will be more productive and who will have healthier lives.
Yes. And you take musicians, some of them did not have vision.
Yeah.
And that made them to be sort of an icon of the music industry. Okay.
Yeah.
So government should know that. Of course, they know. It's not that they don't know.
I think, they don't care, I think, at times. Yeah.
Their focus gets carried away by some of the other disorders, which could be
profitable.
Like infectious disorders, which can be controlled and so on. Of course, COVID took a lot of that pie.
It took away, I think, resources and attention. Yeah.
So,
I'm sure there are a lot of scientists out there going, if we got even 1/10 amount that was spent on COVID, we'd have the cure for some other.
I mean, it is a very sensitive issue to discuss in the first place. But then, as we are seeing now booster doses and third dose, which is booster, and fourth dose of booster, and all that Israel is trying now. When we don't have people who have taken the first dose in the first place, right?
Yeah. No, I think that disparity is blatant. Yeah.
That unevenness is something, I don't know, it sometimes worries you a lot, actually. And once I read that the pet industry in Europe, this is maybe 10-15 years ago, was something like $14 million. And they couldn't find $6 million to educate children from first standard to fifth standard across the world. 6 million.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
and the amount spent, like, say, and that's what I think you met my wife, Nivedita, and she does this exact same thing with the fashion industry, fast fashion. The demand for every year, new seasons, or within every month, new collections, the waste and the damage to the environment and the exploitation of children and women in third world countries. And you spend billions on that and pollute the environment. And then when you tell someone, okay, can you buy less, but it's a little more expensive, it lasts you longer, they're like, no. So one side you have people, having $1 billion budget for clothes, and then you don't even have, 10 lakhs for, for your local vaccination program, But,
and having said that, Sandeep, people all talk about food wastage. Okay? So roughly about 30% to 40% of food is wasted across the world, more so in the Western world. US is notorious for that wastage.
Yeah, I mean, if you tell anyone that half of what you're producing is going, it's a no-brainer that is something needs to be scrutinized, right?
Yes. On the other hand, 50% of clothes are either burnt or buried. Okay.
Yeah, this is something which Nivi is really what got her into this place. It's called overstock, I think, where they just make it and it's not used.
Yeah,
and rather than giving it away for free to children or people who need it, you're like, no, my ego comes in the way. I'm going to burn it.
Yeah. These are things you can never understand in the world. Okay, these dynamics are very, very difficult to understand.
Right.
So I should mention about some of the therapies that are going on.
Yes, I was going to come to that, doctor, because this is something which I think we can talk for hours on end, because I want about the future of humanity. But for people who right now are listening, who might have a family member who might themselves have some things. Of course, I'm going to give all the details of how they can contact your team and you. But as things stand, 2021, December, we're talking, what are the therapies specifically to gene-related disorders out there, and what is the status of their progress with human testing and efficacy with human conditions?
Yes, so what I'm talking about can be generalized for many genetic disorders, but I will sort of talk in relation to eye genetic disorders.
Sure.
So if you take therapy per se, one form is the gene therapy. Okay. So I used to give an example when I do talk to people who come with various disorders to me, is that if you are riding by motorbike or scooter or a car, then the carburetor is defective. Then what you do is that you replace the carburetor.
Yeah.
Okay. In real situation, what you do is you remove the defective carburetor and put the new one.
Yeah.
But in gene therapy, you don't do like that.
Okay.
You leave the old carburetor inside where the gene has mutated in producing defective gene product. And then you put a new carburetor, which means you're putting a new gene inside. You can put that in any part of the body, including the retina. And it will start to produce the needed protein to do its function.
So it overrides the defective carburetor, or it
doesn't override, Sandeep. It sort of remains as an alternate one.
Oh, so they both exist there. It's not like one is defunct. Okay.
Yes, both exist.
Okay.
So another methodology is the stem cell therapy, which again you can do for any organ in the body. And the most approved ones are for the bone marrow related disorders.
Right. Okay.
And where even, of course, in eye disorders, they are doing it, still it is in research, and big advances have been made. So how you can say stem cell therapy equivalent is that your carburetor is not functioning in your vehicle. So instead of putting a carburetor, which is sort of gene therapy, what you're doing is that you're putting a new engine.
You change the whole unit. Okay.
Yes. Okay. You're not changing, actually. You're leaving the old one, putting a new engine.
So in both these cases, you leave the old. Okay.
Yeah, both these cases, you leave the old one. So there is a new technology which is still under a lot of research, but then it has come into clinical practice research, not clinical practice, clinical research, where they do something called as genome editing or CRISPR technology. So what they do is, if your carburetor is wrong, they'll open up the carburetor, find out what is wrong in it. Okay, a particular unit inside the carburetor is wrong, then they will just change that only, which means they will correct the DNA letter, which is the mutated one, and they'll put the right DNA letter back.
Okay. So that comes back to our A, G, C, and T, and they'll make sure that those arrangements are correct, basically.
Yes. And that is a very, very ideal method compared to gene therapy or with stem cell therapy, because you're correcting the fault and making it moderate. And our machinery, genetic machinery, is so robust. The moment the correction is made, it will take over.
So, doctor, for someone like dealing with, say, my kind of condition, Stargardt's disease, and we've spoken about this, but I just want to use myself as an example. Yeah. Say we use, for people listening, I have a mutation in this gene, and there are 2 mutations. And if we use gene editing, so now where those 2 mutations are, you would say they would take that defect out and place the right alphabet of the gene matter, right? Or the gene there. So, in theory, then all past sort of defects are wiped out, and it starts from scratch. It starts producing the right kind of proteins or whatever it does do. Yes. And will that correct the disorder, or will it prevent further?
It's not as simple as that, and it is not as simple as I told also.
Right.
Because when you do this nicking, it's called as nicking and correcting. There is a hypothetical possibility that it might go and nick the wrong places, and in theory it can cause cancer also. Okay, so
even in genome editing.
Genome editing. So you have to be very careful how you do that, and the optimization has to be very perfect, and subsequent surveillance is very important, and so on. Okay, it's not as simple as I said. And so it is in stem cell with a technology called as iPSC cells.
Okay.
So since you are manipulating the genome, you can really sometimes cause problems rather than finding solutions. Okay.
Because there's so
So
much unknown, is it? Okay.
yes, in the genome editing, what is very important is that there should be a certain amount of tissue which is functioning.
Right.
So whether it is bone marrow, or is it liver, or is it retina, okay, there should be a functional component, and then you go and correct it, all right, then it
Okay.
produces the right protein, and therefore it might stabilize the vision at whatever stage it is at this point in time, and it
Okay.
will
So
not
it's
allow it to deteriorate.
okay. So it can't regenerate. It won't deteriorate, but it will remain as is.
As it
But
is.
if
So
it's
stem cell,
completely, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
if the functional tissue is not working, stem cell will be the best method to do.
So that is to regenerate. Okay. Okay.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Ah.
Okay.
Right.
So apart from these, particularly for retina, and of course they've done it successfully for hearing problems, is a retinal chip implant. Okay. So
Okay.
if the retina doesn't work, then you put a chip implant, and then that will try to stimulate the remaining nerves and providing a certain amount of vision.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. So you
So
go
they have
beyond
done
that
that.
layer, right?
Yes, they've done that in hearing problems with cochlear implant, which is very
Okay.
successful. But retinal implant hasn't been as successful as cochlear implant.
Right.
Okay. But they are optimizing that. Again, all of these methodologies are expensive. Okay. And affordability is a question mark. All right. And people
Yeah.
like me in this field are worried about it, because we talk about a solution to the subjects in the family. They're happy to know that it is there. And the moment they know they cannot afford it, it really defeats the purpose.
I
Okay.
mean, that's such a hard place to be, right? For you as
Yes.
knowing that there's a cure, and for the
Yeah.
family knowing there's hope. But
Yeah.
then, I mean, because at the end of the day, money is not something that people just give away freely. Oh no, take this, because that's the. I mean, you know that there is only one thing in the coming in the way between a cure and this person's life improving, but you
Yeah.
can't surpass that barrier, right?
Yes. And also, so the genetic counseling is not an easy job. Because unlike medical practice, where a patient comes with cataract or with a broken bone, and when they leave the clinic, everything is set right.
Yeah.
Cataract is removed, vision comes back, and the bone is set right, and they start to walk. Okay.
Yeah.
So genetic counseling is not like that. People come with a problem, and they leave with the same problem.
Yeah.
And you have to make them feel confident and happy, which is not an
Yeah.
easy job. It takes a time to
And it takes a
develop.
toll, and this, I'm speaking from the receiving end of multiple doctors' visits, right?
Mhm.
Where living with this gene, this eye condition, which is as a result of a gene mutation, is you have to go, of course, to know the physical health of your eye to
Yeah.
see if there are other issues. And every year for 30 years, you come back you leave the doctor's office going, there's no hope of a cure. So it is demotivating, demoralizing
Yes.
to know that there's nothing out there. But that's and I'm telling you, doctor, from someone who's lived with this, but meeting a genetic counselor meeting you last year, 2020, I wouldn't say it's changed my life, but it's given me a very, very strong sense of how I know that there's someone besides because doctors, as you said, they're looking for a cure, and ophthalmologist also has been very high demand because of various multiple eye disorders, gene and non-gene related. But someone like you in the picture and your team, it gives us, I'm saying, I'm going to take a chance and speak on behalf of people dealing with gene related eye disorders. It gives us another set of people or experts who are willing to take time and take us to the conversation of what's out there, as opposed to that void which existed where we were like, okay, there's no cure, let's wait for the next checkup, or let's just go in the dark, and no pun intended, but I think it's definitely a difficult job, I suppose, for you to tell people. Yeah, but it's a very important thing that people and the work you're doing exists because it gives us hope.
Yeah. And also, Sandeep, you see a patient with cataract, you do surgery, they become all right. and broken bone, you're setting it right, they are happy about it. But when you can actually be a big psychological support to somebody and who's suffering, that gives you a different sense of happiness as counselors to us. Okay.
Yeah.
Not many people are ready to do this kind of job. Okay. So therefore, for me, when I teach my students, is that we should have empathy, and we should put ourselves in the shoes of the genetic disorder subjects. This is what I teach them.
Yeah.
Okay. So if your family member is affected or you yourself are affected, then how you would actually react is the way you have to do genetic counseling. That's a very important.
And it's like mental health counseling, right? What I like is that it's not just, okay, once you leave the office, that's it. That's till next year, no news. It's an ongoing process. And I think a lot of people need that, right? They need their hand to be held through this entire situation. And I think that's so important, which you never get from the medical field, because you're just another patient, in the medical practice. Exactly. So, so doctor, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, please do. Please do.
See, if you're affected, then that is one type of issue that we deal with.
Yeah.
But then the parents of such children are much more devastated. Okay.
Yeah.
A sense of guilt in their. I have had multiple situations. I have to point this out here. Is about parents who have married blood relatives consanguinely. Okay.
Right.
Uncle niece, first cousins. Many of them are broken down in front of me in my counseling sessions, saying that they would not have got married to each other if they had known in advance that such kind of genetic disorders can happen when you marry a close relative, blood relative. Okay. Yeah. So it's a very sad thing. But again, having said that, consanguineous marriages give you a big social binding and support. Okay. But then genetic issues are there. So they can take counseling, and now today you can do very advanced prenatal diagnosis where you can detect the child is affected or not. And then accordingly, you can take a decision what to do with it. Yeah. Or you can do something called as pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, where you can take a fertilized embryo and then check whether it has the wrong gene or not. If not, you can go ahead with the pregnancy. Okay, this is mixed with the in vitro fertilization or IVF technology. That's something you can do anywhere in India now. Okay, that is the advantage of knowing all these things. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's just for people who didn't know, because many times we don't know in India that these things exist, and across the board, right? Whether it's most educated, the person who's not aware. I think there's sometimes you don't know, like, oh, I knew this was there in Europe or in Switzerland or whatever, right? In America. But it's so good to know that you are doing this. And I think, Doctor, on behalf of all the people listening today, thank you for doing what you do. I think on behalf of people like me who are living with genetic related eye disorders, even more of a thank you for doing what you do and the people you're training to sort of hold the torch going forward. But for people who haven't had the chance to go to a genetic counselor, where can they find you and your team? Maybe the website link, I'll put it all in the description as well. But maybe how can they contact you, just since you're on the call on this episode, if you could tell them and just give them a few parting words.
Sure. So I've worked in big institutions, and I'm currently also connected with some of the big institutions, eye institutions and so on, Sandeep. And in the meantime, we have started a NGO, or a non-governmental agency, charitable institution. That's going on for the last 10 years. And when families and subjects don't have money to afford for a genetic counseling, we do that free of cost. And if they need to do a genetic test, then we find donors for that and try to connect and help them. And at the same time, we also have a private limited company, a for-profit company, where we see patients and subjects with various genetic disorders and give them the genetic counseling. Okay.
Okay.
So therefore, people who want to access, and there are many genetic counselors in the country. It's not that, and people are elsewhere in the country who want to reach to some of the genetic counselors near their place of stay. We can help them to connect. Okay.
Right.
There is a group called Genetic Counselors in India, and they do train people. And in today's online world, you can connect easily also with us very easily. And if you can't afford, we'll do it for free, as I said. Okay.
Yeah, I'll put the link to
Users
both the NGO and the private limited. I'll get that from you and put the links down there. And
Yes.
for people who want to get genetic counseling, but also people who want to donate and help, I think both
Yes.
are important. So
Yes. And also not only to these two groups, but also for youngsters who want to take genetic counseling as a profession.
yes,
A great
absolutely.
profession, a very enjoyable profession, I would say. And you can get trained and certified anywhere in the Western world, or we trained in India too, and get a certificate for practice. And therefore, there's a big dearth of genetic counselors across the world. Okay, today they can get into industry, pharma industry, and do genetic test, which is called as direct-to-consumer testing. And they can get genetic counseling. They can work in vitro fertilization or IVF centers. And they can work in pharmacogenomics, which is another very fast-growing field where personalized medicine, your drug that you're supposed to take will be known with certain genetic tests even before you take it, to know that how effective it will be and so on.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So therefore, there are great opportunities for youngsters to pick up, and there'll be an acute shortage of genetic counselors in the next few years across the world. Already it is happening. So,
and I think that's the thing, right? People go for the, as you said, the vertical rise and all these big
yes,
things.
correct.
And I think there's the non-monetary attraction, which I think you've just highlighted, which is giving people hope. And
genetic counselors will get a decent pay in the Western world. So, and therefore, they can live comfortably and save comfortably as well, and do a good professional support for people with genetic disorders. Yeah.
No, that's amazing, Doctor. I think I salute the work you do, and I really appreciate you coming on this podcast and sharing all the resources available, the work you do, and your passion for the choice you've made. So thank you on behalf of everyone listening, and personally, thank you for helping us through a lot of the past few months where we needed a guiding, light. You were really, really helpful. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Sandeep, and good luck to you. And I'm glad you made this program so that this information gets across the board. And there are so many people in our country and elsewhere who need support and proper guidance, which is what we do in genetic counseling. And borders should not be barriers for this. And thank you on behalf of our team for helping us to do this program. Thank you, Sandeep. And
my pleasure, Doctor.
SoapyRao program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it.